And it reminds us that we have some adaptive capacity, but that as you increase the amount of climate change, you start to become less and less able to adapt. And therefore, my lesson is you must adapt to the climate change you can't prevent, but you must prevent climate change that you can't adapt to. It is not mitigation versus adaptation. It is both. Adaptation is essential at the beginning to make you less vulnerable, but if we do not bring down the size of our carbon footprint over the next few decades, it will become more and more difficult to avoid circumstances like this all over the world. European heat wave. This is not just a problem of developing countries in the tropics. This is the temperatures in the middle of the summer in Switzerland for the last 100 years. That was 2003. Completely outside of the envelope of known statistics. 50,000 people are estimated to have died all across Europe. 15,000 alone in France. How could it happen? This is a bell curve. That's weather variability. We have cold days, we have hot days. So this is hot weather, this is cold weather. If you warm the temperature, you take the bell curve and you pull it to the right. You make it more likely to have hot, less likely to have cold. That has been observed all over the world. But this is the problem. If you pull it far enough to the right, warm up a few degrees, now you get events nobody has ever seen before, like the European heat wave, the very, very wide hurricanes. That is the things we worry about. Combined take place.
这里面主要讲的是这个热浪，它造成因为它的气体分配的关系啊，所以呢，其实有比较热的天气，另外呢，这个破纪录的热天气，它的发生的几率会比较大啊。那这个是因为暖化刚刚造成了很多事情的变化啊，包含飓风范围的扩大等等。
What else? In dry climates like the U.S. West, there has been a prediction that there would be an increase in wildfire if it's warmer in the summer. And that's because fire spreads more easily when it's hotter and drier. And that's exactly what's happening, about a 400% increase. What's very interesting in this picture is we have snow. We don't have too much of this problem. And we have most of our big fires when the snow melts early, meaning that the spring is warm. The reason for that is it means the summer is longer, drier, hotter, and therefore the probability of fire much greater. The forecast for global warming is a dramatic increase in the time the snow melts, and it's already 2 weeks earlier than it was a century ago. So once again, nature is unfortunately cooperating with you.
这边谈到了美国，这个是美国的西部啊，这个西部的地方的野火，每年的这个森林大火烧的比较多。特别强调里面有一个东西影响，是因为全球暖化造成的每年的融雪的时候是提前的，那融雪提前会造成夏季的延长，所以更干燥，更容易起火。那特别讲说这个自然界发生的事情刚好跟科学预测的这两个方向不谋而合。
And hot days increase the amount of ozone, not the good ozone in the stratosphere, the bad ozone where we breathe. So that's yet another effect. What about nature, ecology? This is a cartoon that goes in the neighborhood. The most vulnerable groups in the world are not even humans. They are plants and animals, which have adjusted to climate changes very large in the past. But the very large changes occur over thousands of years. We're talking about comparable changes in centuries. That's where the worry is. Plus, we have fragmented the land so that not only do species have to move with climate change, but they have to cross factories, farms, freeways, and urban settlements. As a result, IPCC has predicted that something between 20 and 40% of species that we know of could be driven to extinction if we keep warming up more than several degrees.
企鹅像这样企鹅这样的动物，它们是数千年以来在当地已经跟当地的气候已经习惯当地的生存环境。但现在我们讨论的是在100年之内会发生的事情啊，所以这样呢就会造成一些结果。所以 IPCC 的专家说到说20%到40%的物种啊，如果说继续这样子软化下去的话，可能就会进行全面灭绝。
Let me move quickly to try to finish in 10 minutes. Some people have said the polar bear is the big canary in the coal mine. And some have said, well, let's just fix the problem by putting dust in the stratosphere to cool the Earth back down. That's called geoengineering. They would like to use the guns and big battleships to do that. And so this has the polar bears pumping sulfur. Two problems. One, they'll have to do it for 1,000 years. Who do we want to trust to control our climate for 1,000 years? Very risky. And the second problem is acidity. It is absolutely certain that adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere makes the oceans more acidic. It's already been observed. If we continue this trend through the century, the acidity will drop very significantly, where you threaten the viability of calcium carbonate shelled life, clams, coral reefs, and the plankton that are at the very bottom of the food chain that are so critical to nature and the protein sources for fish.
这里面特别讲到是海洋酸化，因为大气中的二氧化碳浓度增加造成的海洋酸化，这个事情它其实影响力是很大，它事实上它会影响到这个食物链啊，因为这个海洋它在食物链里面它占有的重要性很高，因为它会影响到整个蛋白质供应，最底层蛋白质供应。
Thank you. If we have economists in the audience who try to do cost-benefit analysis, I have a challenge for you. How do you come up with the dollar value of protecting the ocean food chain? I don't know how to do it. I don't believe cost-benefit methods apply to sustainability. This is a moral issue about the sustainability of the world and the value of the present versus the value of the future. Can you discount the oceanic food chain? These are tools invented for cash flow transactions in the world where commodities are dollarized. They are inappropriate in the sustainability world. And many departments of treasury who go to places like Copenhagen are shocked to find out that 80% of the people in the world do not believe cost-benefit analysis to be a moral paradigm for deciding the future. I personally, however, believe that when we reach a political negotiation on a target that is both environmentally effective and fair, that we need the economists badly to tell us how to do it cost-effectively. In other words, how do we keep the price as low as we can to achieve a goal? What you don't use economics for is to tell you what the goal is based on dollarized and discounted calculations.
这个有点复杂哈，就是说如果说到哥本哈根会去开会讨论的时候，可能大部分的这个国家的财政部长会发现说，其实花很多的钱才能够 cost effective， 就是它才能够成本效益才能够考虑到，他说世界上其实有很多人根本不相信一本分析这一套东西，但是他个人他认为说，在讨论这些事情形成政策的过程里面，我们还是要借由这个经济学家的这些理论告诉我们说，我们要怎么样去做一件事情它的成本会比较低但是最后要怎么样能够达到这个最后的目标，光是这些东西其实还是不太够的它里面隐喻的意思在这样子，因为里面有些经济学的细节还是很说的。
Thank you. So let me summarize. Potential significant risks, deep uncertainties. Normative judgments mean value judgments. How do you weigh the benefits to the shipping industry of a melted Arctic, which saves them tens of millions of dollars, versus the destruction of the polar bear ecosystem and the Inuit hunting culture, or the viability of small island cultures that have lived in islands for thousands of years being driven off. They have no GDP to map, but that's not what determines the data. So we do not optimize, we do risk management. So this is the way to look at it. The future has two important components of uncertainty. Number one, human behavior. Will we have a low, medium, or high emissions profile? We may choose that at Copenhagen and by international negotiation. But there's a second uncertainty, which is the climate system itself. Will it warm up 1 degree, 3, or 5 if we double carbon dioxide? We cannot answer that question yet. You put the two uncertainties together and you get this real fortune. The planetary gamble. It's a gamble we better not lose.
这就像赌博一样啊，我们不希望输掉这场赌博了啊。那这边刚刚可以说，如果我们有些调试能力的话，我们可能上升。因为现在预估的是上升5度到6度。如果我们有调试的话，可能会上升很多啊。那如果没什么调试的话，可能上升更多。但是我们不想输掉这场赌博。
So for these slots, the good slots, they're not good. It's more than twice the warming we've already had. These slots are the, oh dear, very dangerous. It's a gamble for us, our children, our grandchildren, and here. There is some adaptive capacity if we can keep the warming under about 2 degrees. Here's an example. Australia, this is dengue fever. If you warm up, the dengue fever comes all the way down to Sydney. That's vulnerability. But if you spray, which has health problems and costs money, you probably can prevent it here, but not there. So this is what we say when there is adaptive capacity, but it's limited. Therefore, there's very little adaptive capacity for the very warm spots. There's some here, not perfect. So that's why we need rules. This is a subway coaster in Kyoto. That was a cartoon in the United States in the ugly debate we had, that only the rich countries were having targets, and then there was no target in China and India and South America, and therefore the US Congress said it wasn't fair, the playing field wasn't level. I'll explain why that was ridiculous. In 1997, we had a meeting at the White House, and you might recognize President Clinton and Vice President Gore and a few other people. These two people are now in the Obama administration. This person is, standing up and talking to you. And what we told them, they already knew, which is that this was a risk management problem with the state of the world, hanging in the balance, and that it was a gamble. And they understood that. But that very day, the U.S. Senate passed a rule, 95 to 9, saying if we did not have equal representation from the developing countries who also believed that it was unfair to America and Europe, and they would not support the Kyoto Treaty. I thought it was one of the most immoral acts of the United States Senate, because they forgot something. There's the world emissions, about 4 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per person. There's the United States, about 20. There's the good state, California, about half that. There's the worst state, Texas, 3 times that. I understand this city is somewhere in here. And why is California so much lower than the United States and Texas? It's very instructive. I talk about that in my book. The reason is because California has a 40-year history of rules for efficient technology. We have double pane windows, efficient lights, and now we even tailpipe emission standards, which President Obama has nationalized. And therefore, the amount of energy we use per person is 1/2 of the United States. And it is not a poor state. It's getting right to the end.
那我想一个重点啊，就是说刚看到为什么那个加州的每人的温室排放量比美国要低蛮多，尤其比德州低很多。有一个重要的重点是，过去40年来，加州在实施了能源效率相关的法案啊，比方说这个窗户要做2层等等这样的事情啊，所以长期累积起来，结果就造成了加州的整个人均排放量是比较低一点。
Okay, Okay, so let me finish with the policy sequence. The reason I call it a sequence is I think the world has focused too hard on what the economists call a shadow price on carbon, cap and trade or carbon tax. It's a shadow price because if you cap the emissions at a certain amount, you have to spend money to meet the cap. The amount of money you spend divided by all those tons gives you a price, a shadow price. You could also have an explicit price, which would be a carbon tax. Environmentalists like caps. They want to know how much is going to be cut. Businesses, while they don't like any control, would rather have a carbon tax because they know what their expenses are, and everybody else has to pay the same thing, so the playing field is level.
这里面讲到的是那个tax 这个帽子上面有不能超过上限的这样的政策。这样的政策是现在一般人惯用的。你看里面另外谈到关于椅子价格，因为那个 cap 的东西代表要交税嘛。那椅子价格基本上就是，如果说我们为了避免达到那个顶端的话呢，我们背后要对于这个要降低这个碳排放要花的钱，那个叫做椅子价格。他讲说这是两个东西是现在大家讨论的事情。
Yes. And what bothers me is the debate is so angry over whether we're cutting 10%, 20%, 30% to 2020. I have to tell you the truth. We're not going to do that. It is not possible. It will take 2 decades to be able to achieve that, both politically and technologically. The numbers that we must focus on are not the percentage cut. That's an aspirational goal. We must focus on how many tens of billions of dollars are we spending every year to invent our way out of the problem. The numbers I want are what are our policies, not what are our goals. Because the Kyoto Protocol set a very nice target. I call it a target without teeth. It had no consequences. It's like traffic lights and speed limits without police and judges. Nobody will do it. We must, in Copenhagen, negotiate what we're doing and what the consequences are for not doing it.
刚刚3教特别提到过，我们这个有一些，大家各位都看到一些数字嘛，比方20年之内要降低20%的空气排放的，他认为这个在政治上、他在技术上都是没有办法达到的事情。特别是说，他认为，过去经济秘书定了很多的一些标准或是目标，但是他认为那是没有牙齿的老虎。 所以那是不会有用的。希望说能在哥本哈根会议里面，大家能够讨论出一些有效的机制，才能够产生作用。不然就像交通号志，跟那个竖线在的地方，如果只要没有警察的话，其实大家都遵守这样的规则一样。
Finally, my last point is, let me stress the sequence part. While we fight, probably for a decade, about targets and things, there are other things we can do right now. Should have done 20 years ago that can make the problem less severe while we debate the need. I will add, every one of these steps in the sequence is necessary. None by itself is sufficient. First, many times we've said, adaptation to change is already in the pipeline. You cannot avoid it. Mitigation for change is beyond what we can adapt to. I've said this many times. Performance standards, that's building codes, efficiency, and other ways to get more economic product with less energy and materials. Why is it that we have such a large economy in California with relatively low energy? It's because we generate economics from moving electrons around in microchips and computers, not logs and diesel trucks. So we're talking about structural change in the economy. Unfortunately, those people who log, who mine coal, and who do inefficient technologies are hurt by these policies. So a good strategy involves both protecting the commons through reductions in emissions and side payments and other policies to help people through the transition.
这边提到前两个，就是它这个顺序的前两个顺序啊，前两件事情，第一个我想各位应该蛮清楚啊，就是现在已经变迁了，我们要对它调试啊。那另外刚刚也提到过说，对于那些我们没有办法调试的，我们设法在这个进行一些缓解，这样让我们以后要调试的空间可以再缩小一点。这是他今天这个演讲里面一直强调，而认为调试和缓解这两件事情是相对的，而是有些相互作用的。另外提到的这个 performance standards， 就是这个绩效标准等等啊，他认为说我们虽然说可以用一些比方说能源效率要提高等等这样的事情去约束我们的这些产业啊，但发展一些能源效率比较高的产品，他认为说这还是要符合经济永续的原则，就是说我们不能说只是一些限制，我们要设法让这些东西最后可以变成产业啊，大概这样的意思。
Yes, for example, in this wonderful building goes a compact fluorescence. That is excellent. But in the windows in my hotel, they are one window. They should have been two, and because it's a little cheaper, they built one. It should have been a law, as it is in California. That is the picture for California on performance standards. From 1960 to 2000, there's the United States. This is per capita, per person. There's California. The economy did not stand still. This is a result of mandatory performance standards. But they were not chosen to punish people or punish industry. The choice was based upon cost effectiveness, that the extra investment in the efficient technology paid back more than 7% per year, faster than the mortgage interest rate. So it's a benefit to families. This is an example. This is electricity saved from 1975 to now, from utility programs, building standards, and appliance standards. If you add all of this up, $6 billion a year saved in California from efficiency. And it would not have happened without law. People do not always do what they think is rational for themselves. They don't know. Or they're short-term faults. And this is now becoming very popular around the world. It requires legal standards. And it requires manufacturing to be able to produce the efficient product. You want to say quickly, and then I'll put on my last two.
OK， 这边谈到是加州它的这几种做法啊，那基本上强调是说这些做法是不需要政策或者法律的约束。大概主要的意思是这个，那可以省很多的钱。
Next, we need to invent our way out of the problem. We need incentives to innovate. That means private capital or public capital needs to reach new industries with brilliant ideas to fix problems. Whether it's smart grids, storage for solar, safer nuclear, a wide range of options, they need to have the investment. This will take a mixture of public and private money. Governments are not good at inventing technologies, but they are very good at creating incentives to private groups, provided we make sure the money is spent on what's promised.
OK， 这边提到了就是公家啊，就是说政府它的角色，它不见得是很善于投资的人，但是它可以创造诱因，让民间来进行这方面的投资。
Now, what have we been arguing about at Kyoto? In California, in Europe, and in Copenhagen, shadow price on carbon. Absolutely essential. The polluter must pay. But if the polluter pays, and the price of energy increases, for me, this affects the quality of my wine, my Pinot Noir. For a poor person, it affects the quality of the protein. Therefore, you must, while you are keeping the price high, come up with other ways, side payments, to help people through the transition. Two acts of good governance are NEDs. One, protect the planet. Two, be fair. And that is the challenge in front of us.
对，这边谈到就是，我想各位看这个字面，大家也知道啊，就是污染者付费的原则里面，刚刚讲到这个影子价格啊，这个方式来进行它的附加成本，里面特别提到说，因为反正在政府里面还是会有各种 不同的那个讨论，就是到底是要去直接去跟气候变迁对抗，还是说要谈到说要公平等这些东西，这里面还是会有很多的讨论。
So my last statement is, do not be depressed that this is going to be difficult to negotiate. We can do all of the ones above. We can do all of these while we're talking about that. So we have to work on many fronts. In many countries, no one country has exactly the same solution as any other. And we have to collectively find ways to help each other with finance. I mentioned the very big difference in per capita income or per capita energy use between developing countries and developed countries. The worst outcome is when a developed country says, you have too many people, you have corrupt governance and insufficient incentives, it's your fault. Then the developing country says, your colonialist power, your consumption is obscene, and you block transfer of technology and open markets. Unfortunately, they're both right. So the only solution is a cooperative deal where people realize that the word we're taught in business school with a C, right, competition, is only applied to the technology development. But the word that we need to save our planet is cooperation. And cooperation takes leadership and trust. And I greatly appreciate the invitation to be here to try to build it up a little bit, because we have a lot of planetary cooperation urgently needed in the next 2 decades if we are going to maintain a sustainable transition for our children, grandchildren, and the rest of the planet. Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
最后的这一段话，我想还蛮重要的，各位稍微解释一下啊，就说其实这边讲这些原则性的东西，事实上应用到每一个国家，它出来的结果都是不一样，因为每个国家有它的独特性啊。但这边特别也提到了，我们就像发展中国家跟已开发国家，可能都会有一些互相指责的一些情况，他也用了这些指责，其实也都还有一些道理啊。但是在政治上面实际上互相指责，但是在技术上面是可以竞争的，但是在最后的讨论跟这个政治上呢，必须是要合作的啊，不然的话，这个事情最后会不会变成一个不好的结果？那特别他也感谢说，我们邀请他到这个地方来，然后我们以后可以对方面有更多的一起。